June 7th, 1944, near Sainte-Mère-Église, Normandy. The morning after D-Day smells of cordite, diesel, and wet earth. The fog lies heavy over the fields, a gray shroud that hides the wreckage of gliders and shattered hedgerows. You can hear the sea, faint and constant, rumbling with distant artillery. Down a rutted farm lane, a convoy of olive-drab trucks crawls through the mud. Their sides are stenciled with white letters. U.S. Army Engineer Aviation Battalion, ING, Engineer Command. Inside the lead truck, Sergeant Jack Rourke, age 27, chews on an unlit cigarette. His uniform is stained with oil and mud, his helmet dented. He taps the dashboard. "Christ," he mutters. "We landed less than 24 hours ago, and they already want us to build a goddamn airfield." Beside him, Corporal Willis McAllister grins, wiping grime from his face. "Guess the generals want a front row seat to the war, huh?" Rourke smirks. "No, Red. They want a runway so the flyboys don't drown in the channel." They round a bend and stop at a broad, crater-pocked pasture once owned by a French farmer named Leclerc. A few dead cows lie bloated in the grass. Beyond them, German mines glint faintly in the mud. Lieutenant Colonel Robert M. Webster, commanding officer of the 834th Engineer Aviation Battalion, steps from his jeep and surveys the landscape. He's tall, composed, his steel-rimmed spectacles reflecting the pale sun. "This is it, gentlemen," he says to his officers. "Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. We'll call it A1. Rourke whistles under his breath. "An airfield? Here?" Webster doesn't look away from the field. "HQ wants a 5,000-foot strip ready in 72 hours. Fighter capable by the third day." He turns, expression flat. "We'll deliver." The men stare at him in disbelief. Then the order spreads through the camp like fire. 3 days. Bulldozers are unloaded from flatbeds. Combat engineers with mine detectors sweep the fields, their headphones crackling. A single sniper shot echoes from the hedgerows. Everyone hits the dirt, except the bulldozers. They keep rumbling. Rourke climbs onto a Caterpillar D7, its blade caked with Normandy clay. The engine growls like an animal. He grips the levers and pushes forward, the blade biting into the earth. The work begins. By mid-afternoon, the field is alive. 400 men in organized chaos. Surveyors mark the alignment with stakes and flags. Gravel trucks roar past. Boxes of PSP, pierced steel planking, each panel 66 pounds, are stacked high. Webster walks the line, clipboard in hand. "How's the drainage?" "Non-existent, sir," Rourke shouts over the engine noise. "We're building in a swamp." "Then make it flyable." That night, lanterns flicker across the field. Rain drizzles through the darkness, turning everything to mud. Men hammer steel into soil, their silhouettes black against the glow of burning diesel barrels. Every clang echoes like a heartbeat. Somewhere in the distance, German 88s thud against the beach. The war feels close enough to taste. Rourke wipes rain from his face and pulls a small notebook from his pocket, a field log. He scribbles in pencil. June 7th, 1944, 2300 hours. Still raining. Ground soft but holding. We laid 600 feet of PSP. The Germans shell the beach every few hours. Nobody sleeps. Feels like we're building a runway in hell. He closes the book, tucks it into his breast pocket, and looks out across the field. Bulldozers snort. Sparks fly. The night smells of sweat, oil, and iron. Somewhere above the clouds, the roar of distant thunderbolts can be heard. A reminder of what they're building for. By dawn, the first 1,000 feet of runway glints faintly under the morning light. The mud has turned to steel. Webster watches from his jeep, eyes tired but steady. "Not bad for 24 hours, he mutters. Rourke stands beside him, helmet crooked, cigarette shaking between his lips. "You think the Krauts even know what we're doing out here?" Webster exhales. "They'll know soon enough." Across the lines, east of Carentan, a pair of German officers watch through binoculars from a church steeple. Oberleutnant Karl Drexler, 32, of the 352nd Infantry Division, peers through the smoke. He sees movement, trucks, cranes, men swarming across a field like ants. His adjutant frowns. "What are they doing, sir? Digging trenches?" Drexler adjusts his focus. "No, they're building something. Long. Straight." He blinks, disbelief etching across his face. "An airfield," he whispers. "They're building an airfield." His adjutant stares at him, horrified. "But that's impossible! They landed yesterday!" Drexler lowers the binoculars slowly. "Yes," he murmurs. "Impossible." The distant sound of bulldozers drones through the fog like thunder. And for the first time, the German officer feels something new. Not fear of American firepower, but of their speed. Because somewhere between the beaches and the hedgerows, the Americans have begun to build the war itself. June 8th, 1944. Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, Normandy. The morning fog hangs like smoke from the barrels of yesterday's guns. The air tastes of salt and burnt powder. The earth trembles beneath diesel engines. At 0500 hours, Sergeant Jack Rourke is already ankle-deep in mud, shouting orders over the roar of machinery. "Keep that matting moving. We've got 60 hours left." A Caterpillar D7 lurches forward, its blade grinding through what used to be a French pasture. Behind it, men from Company B lay the foundation. Gravel, sand, then steel. Every strike of a hammer rings like a drumbeat of defiance. Lieutenant Colonel Webster stands on the rise, binoculars raised, watching his men work. A runner approaches through the mud, salutes. "Sir, the 101st boys say the Krauts are counterattacking near Carentan." Webster doesn't lower the glasses. "Not our problem. We're fighting the ground today." By mid-morning, the first pierced steel planking panels, PSPs, clatter into place. Each is 3 feet wide, 10 feet long, perforated for traction. Thousands of them interlock to form a surface strong enough to hold a 30-ton fighter. Corporal McAllister wipes sweat from his face. "You believe this, Sarge? We're building an airport while they're still shooting at us." Rourke grins, teeth bright under the grime. "Hell, we ain't soldiers. We're magicians." In the distance, German artillery rumbles. Shells land near the beach, geysers of mud and seawater exploding into the sky. No one stops. The bulldozers keep grinding forward. A young private named Don Shorty Haynes kneels beside a crate, pulling off the lid. Inside, stacks of PSP panels, shining like dragon scales. He whistles. "These things gonna hold a plane?" Rourke laughs. "They'll hold a goddamn army if you bolt 'em right." At 1500 hours, the first section of runway, 1,500 feet, is complete. Webster inspects it with a cautious step, boots echoing on the steel. "Feels solid," he says. Rourke nods. "Won't win any beauty contests, sir, but she'll fly." The colonel allows himself a rare smile. "Good, because HQ says a C-47's bringing supplies tonight. They're landing here." Rourke stares. "Tonight? Sir, we're still short 1,000 feet. Then you'd better build fast." That night, under flickering lanterns and tracer fire from the east, the engineers work without rest. Rain falls in sheets. The field becomes a swamp of oil, sweat, and steel. Every 20 minutes, someone curses, someone laughs, someone prays. Private Haynes scratches a line in his notebook with a shaking hand. Field log, June 8th, 1944, 2300 hours, still raining. PSP slippery as hell. 2 trucks stuck. Sergeant Rourke says if the planes come, we'll just push them into the mud and call it a runway. I think he's half serious. Funny thing, I believe him. Across the lines, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler receives word from a forward observer. The Americans are building something, long and flat, near the beaches. Drexler frowns. An airfield? The soldier hesitates. "Yes, sir. They've got bulldozers, cranes, thousands of men. Drexler slams his fist on the table. Do they never stop? No, sir, the soldier replies quietly. They do not. By 0400 hours, the rain has eased. Lanterns cast golden halos over the mud. Exhausted men lean on shovels, steam rising from their soaked uniforms. A faint rumble grows in the distance. Engines. Plane inbound, someone shouts. The engineers scatter, clearing the path. Flares ignite, burning bright red against the fog. A C-47 Skytrain appears, low and heavy, its twin engines thundering through the night. The plane dips once, wheels scraping the edge of the unfinished strip. Metal screams. Sparks shower. Then, the impossible. It lands. Bounces once, rolls to a halt. The men erupt into cheers. Rourke slaps McAllister on the back. Told you it'd hold. The colonel walks forward, hands shielding his eyes from the flare light. Well, Sergeant, he says quietly. Looks like we've just made history. Rourke grins, exhaustion in his voice. Hell, sir. We just built the ground the war's gonna fly from. As dawn breaks, the C-47 sits gleaming in the pale morning light, its tires resting on a runway that wasn't there yesterday. In less than 72 hours since D-Day, the Americans have built the first Allied airfield on French soil, and on the horizon, the bulldozers roar back to life. Because for the engineers of the IX Command, the war doesn't wait. It moves on steel. June 9th, 1944. 0430 hours. Normandy, France. The mist lies thick over the new runway, beating on steel like cold sweat. The distant thump of artillery never stops. Dull, rhythmic, relentless. And over it all, the hum of engines. Always engines. Sergeant Jack Rourke hasn't slept in 30 hours. His hands are blistered from tightening PSP bolts. His boots are caked in half an inch of dried mud. He stands beside a jeep, coffee tin in one hand, watching the dawn rise over something he still can't quite believe. A 5,000-foot airstrip, gleaming silver across the French countryside. Lieutenant Colonel Webster steps beside him, eyes scanning the horizon. How close are we? Rourke hands him a clipboard, his voice hoarse. About 3,800 feet laid solid. Another 1,000 by sundown, if we don't get shelled to hell. Webster nods. Good, because those thunderbolts in England are running out of places to land. He looks toward the beach, a haze of smoke and ships and motion, and then back to his engineers. Every foot of steel you lay saves lives. Keep it moving. By mid-morning, the airfield is a blur of motion. Trucks grind through mud, hauling crates of PSP, barrels of aviation fuel, stacks of lumber. Bulldozers roar, graders screech, and men hammer until their palms bleed. Overhead, Allied fighters flash through the clouds. P-47 thunderbolts, their engines snarling like beasts. They dip low, wings glinting, almost as if saluting the men below. Look at that, McAllister shouts, pointing skyward. They'll be landing here tomorrow. Rourke smirks. If they don't blow us up first. A shell explodes a few hundred yards away, throwing mud across the steel. The men duck, wait, then stand and go back to work. In the command tent, Webster studies a map of Normandy spread across a folding table. Colored pins mark new front lines. Beside them, red circles mark the planned airfields. A1, Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, A2, Crickville, A3, Cardonville, A4, Dujumeau. He taps the first one. We finish A1 today. The moment it's operational, I want supply flights inbound. An aide hesitates. Sir, the area's still under artillery range. Webster's jaw tightens. So's the whole damn country. Get it done. At 1500 hours, a signal flare streaks into the sky. Runway clear. Every man stops to watch. A distant hum grows louder, engines chopping the air. Through the mist, a plane appears. A C-47 Dakota, its fuselage patched with bullet holes. It drops low, gear down, wheels skimming the treetops. Rourke shields his eyes. Jesus, he's really coming in. The plane touches down hard, bounces once, and settles. The PSP panels groan, flex, but hold. The men erupt, cheering, shouting, some laughing hysterically. One private weeps openly, wiping his face with a filthy sleeve. Rourke grins through the noise. Well, I'll be damned. We actually did it. Webster watches in silence, then finally exhales. Mark it in the log. A1 operational. June 9th, 1944. Across the hedgerows, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler of the German 352nd Infantry Division crouches in a church tower near Carentan. He peers through binoculars, disbelief etched across his mud-streaked face. Through the lens, he sees the silver plane taxiing on a strip that didn't exist 2 days ago. He lowers the glasses slowly. Sie haben eine Landebahn gebaut? He mutters. They've built an airfield? His adjutant stammers. Sir, it's not possible. The terrain was. Drexler cuts him off. Nothing is impossible to these people. He turns away, expression grim. They build faster than we can retreat. That night, floodlights turn the Normandy sky a ghostly white. The airfield hums with life. Mechanics refueling, medics unloading stretchers, trucks reversing with ammunition crates. Private Haynes sits by a drum fire, scribbling in his notebook. June 9th, 1944, 2,330 hours. 47s landed today. One brought fuel, another took wounded back to England. We ate cold rations watching the planes lift off. Everyone cheered. Then we went back to work. The ground shakes all the time now. Not from bombs, but from engines. Feels like the earth itself is fighting on our side. He closes the notebook and stares at the runway lights glowing through the fog. It's not beautiful. It's crude, filthy, dangerous. But to him, it's a miracle. In the officer's tent, Webster and Rourke share a rare cup of coffee. You realize, Webster says quietly, we just changed how wars are fought. Rourke chuckles. Hell, sir, we just laid down a bunch of tin sheets. Webster shakes his head. No, Sergeant. We just gave the air war legs. Outside, a P-47 streaks low overhead, its landing lights cutting through the mist like search beams. The roar rolls across the field, shaking every tent and tool chest. Rourke looks up, cigarette hanging from his lip. You think the Germans know what hit him? Webster watches the fighter climb into the clouds. Oh, they'll find out soon enough. The night ends with a single sound that drowns out the artillery, the waves, and the rain. The thunder of American engines taking off from French soil. And as the first Allied airfield blazes to life behind the front lines, every man there, soldier, engineer, pilot, understands what it means. The invasion isn't just holding, it's taking flight. June 10th, 1944. Dawn over Sainte-Mère-Église, Normandy. A low mist rolls through the hedgerows like smoke from an invisible fire. The steel runway at A1, Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, gleams beneath it. A serpent of silver stretching across the wounded countryside. Engines cough, roar, and settle into a steady growl. The heartbeat of a new kind of battlefield. Sergeant Jack Rourke stands near the edge of the matting, goggles hanging around his neck, uniform stiff with grime. He watches as ground crews pull chocks from the first P-47 Thunderbolt of the morning. Clear the line, someone shouts. The fighter surges forward, its propeller biting into the mist, tires hissing on the PSP. Then, lift. The plane leaps skyward, wheels tucking in, the sound shaking the ground like distant thunder. Corporal Willis McAllister laughs, shouting over the din. They'll never believe this back home. Rourke grins. Hell, I barely believe it now. By ZU 800 hours, the airfield hums with rhythm. Fuel trucks trundle between rows of parked aircraft. Mechanics in grease-stained coveralls work under wings, checking belts and hydraulics. Pilots, some barely 20, sip coffee from tin cups before climbing into cockpits. Each carries two 500-pound bombs bound for the German armor regrouping near Isigny-sur-Mer. The turnaround time is breathtaking. Planes lift, strike, and return within an hour, a tempo that turns the skies into a revolving hammer. The engineers watch in silence as the first formation disappears eastward. Rourke shakes his head. All that steel we laid, and now it's hitting them right back. Across the hedgerows, in a damp barn south of Carentan, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler listens to the roar with a hollow expression. Every hour, the sound grows nearer, heavier. His adjutant bursts in, mud-spattered and trembling. Herr Oberleutnant, the Americans. They are flying from France now. Our forward patrols report P-47s taking off only kilometers away. Drexler stares at him, incredulous. From captured airstrips? The young man shakes his head. From fields they have built themselves. The German officer presses his palms against the table, knuckles white. He whispers, "They have crossed a sea, fought through our lines, and now they build airfields." He looks up, eyes dark. They are fighting a different kind of war. Back at A1, the engineers keep working, because the work never stops. Every landing tears new dents into the matting. Every takeoff loosens the bolts. Maintenance crews crawl across the runway like surgeons. When the rain comes, they spread sand and crushed rock to keep the surface firm. Private Don Shorty Haynes kneels beside a loose panel, wrench in hand. He wipes grease from his face and mutters to his field log. June 10th, 16:30 hours. The Thunderbolts fly so low you can see the pilots' faces. They dip their wings when they pass. We wave our caps back. Feels good to be noticed, even if we're covered in mud. He pauses, watching a squadron form up overhead. They said the war would be hell. Nobody said it would be this loud. Night falls. The rain returns, steady and cold. Lanterns flicker through the haze, their reflections rippling across wet steel. The men work by instinct now. Drive, hammer, tighten, move on. Each clang of a mallet blends with the rhythmic cough of generators. Rourke sits on a fuel drum, cigarette glowing faintly. "Feels like we're running the world's biggest machine," he says. McAllister, half asleep beside him, murmurs, "Yeah, only it's made out of mud and sweat." A jeep approaches, headlights dimmed. Colonel Webster steps out, his greatcoat streaked with rain. He looks out across the shining field, the rows of aircraft, the trucks, the tents trembling in the wind. "Well done, Sergeant," he says quietly. "You've built more than a runway. You've built momentum." Rourke nods, too tired to speak. Webster turns to go, then adds, "Get your men some rest. We move again soon." New site near Cardenville. Rourke blinks. "Already? We just finished this one." The colonel's voice is calm but final. "The front's moving east. We move with it." When dawn comes again, the first light spills over A1, now alive with flight. Trucks form convoys, fuel drums clatter, propellers spin. The engineers watch as another squadron of Thunderbolts rises into the clouds. Rourke shades his eyes, smiling faintly. "You hear that, Red? That's the sound of victory getting closer." McAllister chuckles. "Yeah, and us chasing it with a toolbox." They laugh, but only for a moment, because already the bulldozers are warming up, ready to carve another miracle out of French mud. The war in Normandy has entered a new phase. The front line no longer moves by foot or tank, but at the speed of a Caterpillar D7. And somewhere in the east, Oberleutnant Drexler listens to that distant thunder and realizes the ground itself has joined the fight. June 12, 1944. Near Cardenville, Normandy. Rain drums on canvas tents like machine gun fire. The roads are rivers of mud, the hedgerows dripping, and the air thick with the smell of diesel and rot. The 834th Engineer Aviation Battalion has arrived at their next assignment. a low, swampy stretch of farmland marked on the maps as Advanced Landing Ground A3 Cardenville. Sergeant Jack Rourke jumps down from a truck and sinks to his ankles in muck. He grimaces. Jesus, Colonel, this place is a swamp. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Webster just nods, eyes scanning the terrain. Then drain it, Sergeant. The P-47s can't land in England forever. Rourke looks out over the flooded fields, where bulldozers idle like waiting beasts. You heard the man, he shouts. Get the pumps running and start cutting ditches. The men fan out, shovels flashing, machines roaring to life. The noise drowns out the distant shell fire. By mid-morning, the engineers are knee-deep in water, hauling drainage pipe and gravel. German artillery from the hills interrupts them every few hours. Distant whines, then the earth erupting in mud and steel. Each time the men hit the ground, wait for the barrage to end, and rise again without a word. Private Don Shorty Haynes writes in his notebook beneath a rain poncho, June 12th, 11:40 hours. Rain won't stop. Ground's a mess. We lost a grader to a shell. No casualties, thank God. Sergeant says we'll lay matting tonight. Can't tell if he's serious anymore, or just too tired to know better. By evening, the pumps have drained enough to start leveling. The bulldozers plow through the muck, blades throwing arcs of mud high into the air. The engines roar through the night like thunder rolling over the hills. Rourke and Corporal McAllister work side by side, stakes in hand, marking the new strips outlined by lantern light. Their shadows stretch long across the churned soil. McAllister mutters, "This ain't soldierin', Sarge. This is damn construction work." Rourke grins through the mud. Yeah, except the other guys shoot back. Near midnight, Colonel Webster drives through the worksite in his Jeep, headlights dimmed. He stops beside Rourke and leans out. How's it look? Rourke wipes rain from his eyes. Flat enough to make the flyboys happy, sir. Webster smirks. Good. They'll be here in 12 hours. Rourke blinks. You're serious? Always. The colonel drives off, leaving the sergeant staring after him, half laughing, half in disbelief. Guess sleep's canceled, boys, he yells, and the men groan but keep working. A few miles away, inside a ruined farmhouse near St. Lo, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler studies aerial reconnaissance photos scattered across a table lit by a flickering lantern. Black lines scar the landscape, new runways appearing every 2 days. He rubs his temples, exhausted. His intelligence officer points with a pencil. Here, near Sainte-Mère-Église, another by Cardonville. Look, here and here. Every 48 hours, a new one. Drexler mutters. They're not just fighting. They're rebuilding the earth. The officer nods grimly. It's their machines, sir. Their organization. Drexler shakes his head. No, it's their will. He looks out through the broken window toward the horizon, where faint flashes of artillery light the night sky. Even our airfields take weeks. Theirs are born overnight. Back at Cardenville, the engineers press on. Lanterns burn low. The rain has stopped, but the ground steams. Men hammer PSP panels together, the metallic clanging echoing across the valley. Rourke crouches beside a truck bed stacked with steel sheets. All right, Red. This row's our spine. Keep her straight. McAllister grins, mud dripping from his chin. Straight as an arrow, Sarge, assuming the arrow's drunk. They both laugh, then go back to work. At dawn, sunlight cuts through the fog, striking the wet metal like fire. Rows of pierced steel planking stretch across the valley, shimmering silver, the spine of a new airfield. The men stand back for a moment, leaning on their tools, steam rising from their soaked uniforms. Then they hear it. Engines, low, fast, approaching from the west. Rourke shades his eyes. You hear that? McAllister nods, smiling. They're coming. A formation of P-47 Thunderbolts swoops overhead, sunlight flashing off their checkerboard noses. the 365th Fighter Group. They dip their wings in salute. Rourke grins, voice cracking. "Guess they noticed." McAllister laughs. "They better have. We built their runway in a damn swamp." By sunset, the first fighters touch down. Mud splashes, engines roar, and the impossible becomes ordinary. Colonel Webster watches from the edge of the strip, hands on his hips. In less than 72 hours, his men have turned a bog into a fortress of steel. He turns to Rourke. "That's 5 airfields in 1 week." Rourke wipes his brow. "You aiming for 10? Webster's smile is faint, but certain. Before the month's out, in the hills beyond St. Lo, Drexler stands on a ridge, binoculars raised. Through the glass, he sees the American planes taking off, again and again, from a field that had been farmland days before. He lowers the binoculars slowly. "They fight with shovels as well as guns," he says quietly. "Perhaps better." Behind him, the guns of the Wehrmacht thunder uselessly against the horizon. That night, as the engineers eat cold rations beside humming generators, Rourke opens his notebook. June 12, 1944. 2300 hours, Cardenville, up and running. Rain still coming, but the strip held. 5 fields in 7 days. Feels like we're laying down the bones of something bigger than we understand. He closes the book, listening to the faint hum of planes above. For the first time since D-Day, the skies of Normandy belong entirely to the Allies, and to the men who made the ground itself fight back. June 16, 1944. Near Doujumeau, Normandy, dawn bleeds over the horizon in streaks of gold and gray. The earth trembles under the weight of engines. Not tanks this time, but bulldozers. The men of the 834th Engineer Aviation Battalion have rolled into another battered field, their 5th in 10 days. This one will be A6 Doujumeau, and the ground is littered with shell craters, splintered fences, and the bones of German artillery. Sergeant Jack Rourke climbs down from his truck, boots squelching in the muck. He looks over the new site, a wasteland of churned mud and twisted metal. "Well, Colonel," he says, "if the devil ever needed a parking lot, this'd be it." Lieutenant Colonel Robert Webster steps up beside him, hands on his hips. "Then let's make it heaven for the flyboys." He gives a simple order. 3 days. Everyone knows what that means. The men move like clockwork. Surveyors mark the ground. Graders chew through the rubble. Bulldozers roar in parallel lines like charging beasts. Each machine burns fuel faster than a Sherman tank, and the 834th uses more than 50,000 gallons a day. Trucks shuttle from the beaches non-stop, hauling pierced steel planking, gravel, timber, and fuel. "Hey, Sarge," shouts Corporal McAllister, wiping grease from his face. "We're out of matting." "Not for long," Rourke answers, checking his watch. "Convoy's due in 2 hours." Sure enough, by midday, a line of 6-wheelers grinds over the ridge, each stacked high with silver sheets. The drivers wave as they pass, shouting jokes drowned by the noise. The engineers unload by hand, forming a chain gang of sweat and motion. Every clang of steel on steel sounds like progress itself. A few miles east, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler crouches in a captured French barn, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He watches the convoys rolling inland, endless streams of trucks and cranes. His adjutant whispers, "They fight like factories, Herr Oberleutnant." Drexler lowers the binoculars, eyes hollow. "Factories that move." He points toward the horizon, where bulldozers slice into the earth like surgeons. "Our men dig trenches. Theirs build airfields. Tell me, which army do you think wins a modern war?" The young adjutant doesn't answer. Back at A6, the engineers work under constant threat. Artillery thumps from the east, the concussions rolling across the valley. Every few minutes, they pause to listen, then resume. Rain begins again in the afternoon, turning the ground to paste. Private Don Shorty Haynes mutters, You think they'll ever run out of rain in this damn country? Rourke grins. If they do, they'll send us to dig more. By nightfall, half the runway is laid. Generators hum. Floodlights bathe the site in ghostly white. Steam rises from the machines, men's faces streaked with mud and sweat. It's like watching an industrial miracle unfold in the middle of a war zone. At 2300 hours, Colonel Webster radios headquarters. A6 nearing completion, runway 3,800 feet. PSP stable, planes can land by first light. He puts down the mic, voice hoarse but steady. Tell Rourke to tighten the east end. We'll extend another 200 feet by dawn. When the runner delivers the message, Rourke just laughs. Sure thing, Colonel. Sleep's overrated anyway. Across the dark field, McAllister leans against a drum of aviation fuel, jotting in his pocket diary. June 16th, 2330 hours. Floodlights make it look like daylight. We're ghosts building in the mud. Every time a plane lands, it's proof we're still alive. Sarge says the war moves at the speed of a bulldozer. I think he's right. He looks up as a distant rumble fills the night. Not artillery, but engines. Faint lights blink in the clouds. Planes inbound, someone yells. Rourke squints toward the sky. Hell, they're early. A P-47. Thunderbolt drops through the mist, gear down. Then another, and another. They circle once, then land, perfectly, one after the other, on a runway that was swamp and craters just 48 hours earlier. The men cheer. Floodlights sweep the field, reflecting off the wings as the fighters taxi into line. Their pilots climb out, boots splashing in the mud. One of them, a young captain with grease-streaked goggles, shakes Rourke's hand. You built this? He asks in disbelief. Rourke nods. Couple of long nights. The pilot laughs. You boys build miracles. Rourke smirks. Nah, just steel and stubbornness. As dawn breaks, the sky turns gold. The runway gleams wet and perfect, alive with motion. Ground crews refuel the P-47s. Mechanics patch bullet holes. Engines roar, propellers blur, and the first fighters take off, one after another, climbing east toward the front. Colonel Webster stands on a mound of earth, watching them go. You realize, Sergeant, he says quietly to Rourke, that we've done in days what the Germans spent years fortifying. Rourke exhales smoke from his cigarette, eyes on the horizon. Yes, sir. They conquered the ground. We're turning it into air. Far behind enemy lines, Drexler receives another reconnaissance report. New runways, new planes. He crumples the paper in his fist. Every kilometer we lose, he says, they build another runway to follow us. He looks out through the barn's shattered window as a flight of P-47s streaks overhead. His voice drops to a whisper. They're not fighting a war of destruction anymore. They're fighting a war of creation. By midnight, A6 du Jumeau is fully operational. The machines fall silent, cooling in the mist. The men collapse beside their dozers and trucks, asleep before they hit the ground. Only the faint hum of generators remains, and the whisper of wind over the shining steel. From the beaches to the hedgerows, Normandy breathes with the sound of engines. The Americans have turned mud into metal, and metal into momentum. And for the first time in history, the front line moves not by soldiers' feet, but by the will to build. June 20th, 1944. Near Le Cambre, Normandy, the wheat fields whisper under a steady wind, carrying the smell of smoke and gasoline. On the horizon, black columns rise where St. Lo burns. The Allied front is pushing east, and the engineers, always just behind the battle, are already dismantling yesterday's miracles. A convoy of olive-drab trucks rattles down a dirt road, piled high with pierced steel planking. Each panel is scarred with mud, oil, and footprints. Everyone has a history. Somewhere a plane took off from it, or landed bleeding. Sergeant Jack Rourke rides in the passenger seat, a cigarette between his lips, grease streaked across his face. His voice is rough from days without sleep. "You'd think we'd get to keep one of these airfields," he mutters. From behind the wheel, Corporal McAllister grins. "Not our style, Sarge. We build 'em, the flyboys use 'em, then we chase the next fight." Rourke exhales a long plume of smoke. "Yeah. We're ghosts, Red. Ghosts that leave runways behind." Back at A1, Saint-Pierre-du-Mont, bulldozers drag up the PSP panels they laid only weeks before. The once bustling airfield is quiet now, just seagulls circling over empty revetments. Fuel drums sit rusting in the rain. The engineers pry up each sheet, stack it, load it, and move on. Within a day, it's as if the airfield never existed. Colonel Robert Webster surveys the empty plane from his jeep. A sergeant approaches, clipboard in hand. "Sir, all materials recovered. Orders to proceed to the next site east of La Combe." Webster nods. "Good, let's keep the sky moving." He looks over the desolate field, then adds softly, "They'll never know we were here." A few miles ahead, near the new front, German forces stumble backward through hedgerow country. The retreat is chaos. Broken vehicles, scattered rifles, the smell of burnt oil and fear. Oberleutnant Karl Drexler walks among his remaining men, perhaps 40 in total. His uniform is torn, his boots soaked. They move through the ruins of a Norman farmhouse, its walls pocked with bullet holes. From a window, Drexler lifts his binoculars and scans the valley ahead. Through drifting smoke, he sees them. Trucks, bulldozers, men in helmets marked U.S. Army engineers. They are already at work, flattening ground, spreading steel. "My God," he breathes. "Another one." His adjutant, pale and trembling, whispers, "Another what, sir?" Drexler lowers the binoculars. "An airfield. They're building another airfield." The young man stares, horrified. "But this land was ours yesterday." "Not anymore," Drexler says. "They fight by building." He looks skyward as a flight of P-47 Thunderbolts passes low overhead, strafing the road they just vacated. "They move the sky with them," he murmurs. We retreat, and the air follows. Back at the new construction site, soon to be A9 Le Mollet, the engineers attack the land with industrial fury. Bulldozers roar across fields once sown with wheat, blades cutting deep trenches in the earth. Surveyors bark measurements. Trucks dump load after load of crushed rock. Each clang, each engine cough is part of a single mechanical heartbeat. Colonel Webster's jeep pulls up beside Rourke. "We're extending the runway to 500 feet, Webster shouts over the noise. "Command wants to bring in B-26 Marauders." Rourke wipes sweat from his face. "We'll need every sheet of PSP we got, then make it stretch." The men move faster. Lines of engineers hammer down planking in perfect rhythm, an iron drum beat echoing through the French countryside. Rain falls, hissing on the hot steel. It doesn't slow them. Nothing does. At 1700 hours, Rourke walks the length of the new strip, boots clanking against metal. He stops halfway, looking down at his reflection in a puddle. McAllister jogs up behind him, breathless. "She's ready, Sarge." Rourke nods slowly. "Hard to believe, ain't it?" McAllister grins. "Feels like we're laying down America one panel at a time." Rourke chuckles. "Yeah, one noisy, muddy miracle at a time." As the sun sinks behind the hedgerows, the first aircraft approach, their silhouettes black against the orange sky. P-47s, returning from missions over St. Lo. They descend one by one, wheels touching steel with a metallic screech. The airfield shudders, but holds. Colonel Webster watches from the control tent. "Mark it," he says to his adjutant. "ALG A9 Le Mollet, operational, June 20th, 1944. A cheer ripples across the field. Far to the east, Drexler receives another reconnaissance photo. It shows a long, dark scar of steel running through farmland that was German soil days before. He stares at it, silent. His sergeant says quietly, "We cannot destroy them faster than they build." Drexler folds the photo and slips it into his pocket. "No," he says, almost reverently. "They build faster than we can understand." Night falls on the new airfield. Generators hum. Floodlights burn through the mist. Mechanics work on engines while the engineers eat from cold tins beside the runway. The clang of tools blends with the distant thunder of artillery. Rourke sits on a stack of PSP panels, notebook open on his knee. June 20th, 1944. 2,330 hours, built another one. Sometimes I wonder how many miles of France we've turned to steel. Colonel says we move east tomorrow. Maybe someday, when this is all over, somebody will land in a field and never know we built it first. He closes the book, staring out over the gleaming runway. Somewhere overhead, another wave of fighters roars eastward into the dark. Their engines echo across the valley, the sound of a war that no longer marches, but builds. June 25th, 1944. Near Saint-Lô, France. The night sky flickers with artillery flashes, white, red, and orange, like a storm of angry gods. The Battle of Saint-Lô has begun. Every field trembles with the concussion of shells, and the air tastes of dirt and metal. But amid the chaos, the 834th Engineer Aviation Battalion is still at work, because war doesn't wait for silence. Sergeant Jack Rourke drives a steel stake into the mud, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "Keep your heads down and your hands moving," he yells. A German 88 Meteor shell detonates 100 yards away, showering the men with mud. No one stops, not even for a second. Bulldozers rumble through the darkness, blades pushing the debris of war aside. Wrecked carts, dead livestock, splintered trees. Behind them, trucks groan under crates of PSP, their headlights covered in black tape. Each clanging sheet laid down is an act of defiance. Corporal Willis McAllister yells over the din, "You ever think the Army's crazy, Sarge?" Rourke laughs, his voice hoarse. "Every damn day. But we're winning, so I don't argue." The field they're carving from the mud will become Advanced Landing Ground, A11, Saint-Lô. And it's closer to the front than any before, barely 6 miles behind the lines. It's not just construction anymore, it's combat engineering. Private Don Shorty Haynes scribbles by flashlight, his hands shaking. June 25th, 1944, 2,200 hours. They say we're in artillery range now. I believe it. We've been shelled 4 times today. 2 men hurt, 1 dozer hit. Sarge says to work faster. Funny, faster feels safer. He tucks the notebook away, picks up his wrench, and keeps tightening bolts in the rain. At 100 hours, Colonel Robert Webster arrives in his Jeep, headlights darkened. His voice is calm, but urgent. "We need that strip operational by morning. The P-47s can't fly from Le Mollet anymore. They're too far from the front." Rourke wipes his face, spattered with mud. "We're laying the last panels now, sir. She'll hold." Webster nods once. "Good, because the infantry's depending on you." He drives off into the dark, his taillights disappearing in the smoke. Across the line, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler and what remains of his command huddle inside a ruined chapel. The stained glass is shattered, the altar scorched black by fire. A messenger bursts in, carrying a damp reconnaissance photo. Drexler spreads it under the flickering lantern light. The image shows a ribbon of silver running across the landscape near Saint-Lô. "Airfield completed near Le Mollet," the report reads. "Second operational near Saint-Lô. Allied fighters launching from captured ground." Drexler stares at it, his eyes hollow. "They are faster than our retreat," he whispers. They've built wings out of the soil itself. He steps outside into the cool night. The horizon glows faintly with the light of explosions. Above, engines hum, endless, mechanical, unstoppable. You can't fight a nation that builds the sky wherever it goes, he says quietly. You can only watch it move. At dawn, the rain breaks. Mist hangs low over the hedgerows. The engineers have worked all night, and their eyes are bloodshot, uniforms soaked through. The runway stretches before them, rough, gleaming, and perfect in its brutality. Rourke kneels beside the last panel, tightening a final bolt. Done, he says, almost in disbelief. About time, McAllister mutters, collapsing onto a crate. They hear it before they see it. The deep, rolling rumble of piston engines. Then the silhouettes appear. P-47 Thunderbolts of the 404th Fighter Squadron, flying in low through the fog. Here they come, someone shouts. The first fighter touches down with a metallic screech. Then another, and another. The ground trembles with the weight of each landing, but the steel holds. One of the pilots climbs out, still in flight gear, grinning wide. You boys built this overnight? He asks incredulously. Rourke wipes grease from his chin. Give us another day. We'll build you a second one. The pilot laughs, claps him on the shoulder, and shouts over the roar of engines. Then we'll keep flying. You just keep giving us somewhere to land. That evening, the engineers gather for a rare hot meal. Beans, coffee, and cigarettes passed between dirty hands. Colonel Webster joins them, his voice carrying above the wind. Men, he says, in the last 3 weeks, you've built 9 airfields under fire. You've given our boys the sky, and that's how we'll win this war. The men are too exhausted to cheer. They nod, smiling faintly, knowing that he's right. Rourke stares out over the dark field, where the silhouettes of thunderbolts glint under the lanterns. He takes a slow drag from his cigarette and murmurs, "Guess we're the only soldiers who fight without shooting." McAllister chuckles. Yeah, but we make a hell of a noise doing it. In the distance, the thunder of engines rises again. More planes, incoming, outgoing, a constant rotation. Each takeoff shakes the steel, rattles the earth, and echoes into history. The engineers sit and listen, weary and proud. Every rumble is proof of what they've built. Proof that the war, now, moves on runways made by ghosts in mud. July 5th, 1944. Near Lignerolles, Normandy. The sky is the color of smoke and tin. The countryside, once green and alive, has turned to gray ash and twisted fences. Somewhere beyond the hills, St. Lo still burns. The Allies are winning ground yard by yard. But behind every advance, the engineers of the Ike's Command move faster than the guns. The 834th Engineer Aviation Battalion has arrived at another field. A scarred meadow just outside Lignerolles. What was once a pasture will soon be Advanced Landing Ground A-12. Sergeant Jack Rourke climbs atop a stack of PSP panels, wiping sweat from his brow. He stares out across the organized chaos. Bulldozers chewing through hedgerows, graders leveling the soil, trucks unloading drums of fuel. The smell of hot oil mixes with wildflowers crushed under tank treads. Corporal McAllister jogs over, waving a clipboard. Sarge, word from command. They want this one longer. 5,500 feet. Says they're bringing in marauders. Rourke whistles. B-26s, huh? Those things hit like freight trains. McAllister nods. And they weigh just as much. Then let's make sure the ground can take it. By mid-morning, the airfield thrums like a living machine. Lines of men swing sledgehammers in rhythm, bolting steel panels into the earth. Others drive stakes for revetments and drainage ditches. Every clang and roar adds another heartbeat to the industrial symphony. Private Don Shorty Haynes jots in his notebook, kneeling beside a row of half-buried panels. July 5th, 1944. 0930 hours. It's hot. Too hot for France. The air smells like metal and sweat. The colonel says we'll have bombers landing by tomorrow. It sounds impossible, which means we'll probably do it. He tucks the notebook away and returns to work. A few miles east, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler stands in the ruins of another hedgerow defense. His company, once 150 strong, now numbers fewer than 40. They march slowly through a wasteland of broken armor and burned trees. From the ridge, he spots movement. Trucks, cranes, bulldozers, all marked with the white star of the U.S. Army. His sergeant mutters, "They're everywhere now, Herr Oberleutnant." Drexler raises his binoculars. He watches as the Americans cut through hedges and turn the land to steel. "They build," he says quietly, as if the war itself were their construction project. The sergeant spits. "We fight, they build. How do you stop that?" Drexler lowers the glasses. "You don't." Back at A12, the heat shimmers over the runway. The PSP panels glint silver white in the sunlight, reflecting off the helmets of men who've worked for days without proper rest. Their uniforms are salt-crusted with sweat, their hands raw and blistered. Colonel Robert Webster arrives in his jeep, stepping out with his usual calm authority. "Rourke," he calls. "How close are we?" 4,000 feet solid, sir. We'll have the extra 1,500 by dawn." Webster nods, satisfied. "Excellent. The first B-26s are inbound at first light. Let's make sure they've got a home to land on." He walks the edge of the runway, his boots clanking on the steel. "Do you realize, Sergeant," he says, "that we've built more airfields in 1 month than the Germans did in 4 years of occupation?" Rourke wipes his hands on a rag. "Yeah, they conquered Europe. We're rebuilding it." Webster allows himself a rare grin. "And that's why we'll win." The night hums with energy. Generators rumble. Men eat cold rations beside glowing floodlights. A faint drizzle begins, hissing against the steel. Rourke sits beside McAllister, drinking burnt coffee from a canteen cup. "You ever think about what happens after?" Rourke asks. "When the fighting stops?" McAllister shrugs. "You mean when we don't have to build runways in the middle of artillery fire?" "Yeah." "You think they'll remember any of this?" McAllister laughs softly. "Maybe not our names, but they'll remember what flew from these fields." Rourke nods, staring into the darkness. "That's enough for me." At dawn, the first formation of B-26 Marauders appears, black silhouettes against the pale gold sky. The twin engines thunder as they descend, wheels kissing the steel runway one after another. The ground trembles, dust rising in shimmering halos around the landing gear. The first pilot climbs out, helmet tucked under his arm. He walks over to Rourke, shaking his head in disbelief. "This strip wasn't here last week," he says. Rourke grins. "Wasn't here yesterday either." The pilot laughs. "You fellas build faster than the Luftwaffe can bomb." "Good thing," Rourke says. "We plan to keep it that way." Across the valley, Drexler watches the same bombers lift off. He can feel the ground vibrate even from miles away. The sound is endless. A mechanical storm rolling toward Germany. His adjutant approaches, voice hollow. "Sir, intelligence says the Americans now have airfields every 30 kilometers. Drexler doesn't look up. "Then the sky belongs to them. And once the sky is lost," he gestures at the wreckage of a burned-out tank, "the ground will follow." He kneels, picking up a fragment of twisted metal, a scrap of American PSP captured weeks ago and warped by fire. He turns it in his hands, eyes reflecting the dawn. "They build faster than we can destroy," he whispers. "And that's why we're finished." That night, the field glows with motion. Bombers taxiing, mechanics refueling, engines roaring into the mist. The airfield is alive, breathing, unstoppable. A living artery of the Allied advance. Rourke sits on a fuel drum, notebook open, his pencil scratching slowly. July 5th, 1944. 20 to 30 hours. The war moves forward one airfield at a time. We build, they fly, and the world changes. Maybe someday, someone will understand what that meant. He closes the book, tucks it into his pocket, and looks up at the endless sky, now filled with the sound of victory in motion. August 1st, 1944. Near Coutances, France, dawn rises over Normandy like a curtain lifting on a new act of war. The air is sharp with the smell of dust, diesel, and burnt wheat. The last echoes of the Battle of Saint-Lô have faded, and the great Allied breakout, Operation Cobra, is tearing through the German lines. Columns of tanks roll east toward Avranches, toward Paris, toward victory. And as always, behind them come the men with bulldozers. A convoy of trucks snakes down the battered road, engines growling, trailers clanking with pierced steel planking. In the lead jeep, Sergeant Jack Rourke squints through the dust cloud ahead. Beside him, Corporal Willis McAllister spits grit from his teeth. "You think they'll ever run out of land for us to build on, Sarge?" Rourke smirks. "Not till we hit Berlin." Behind them, the men of the 834th Engineer Aviation Battalion ride in silence, slumped against their rifles and toolkits. They've built 11 airfields in under 2 months. Now they're bound for their 12th, Advanced Landing Ground A-15 Coutances. By noon, they reach the site, a rolling meadow on the outskirts of town. The Germans have fled in disarray, leaving behind blackened half-tracks and the twisted wrecks of panzer turrets. The ground is uneven, pocked with bomb craters and littered with shrapnel. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Webster steps out of his jeep, lighting a cigarette as he surveys the land. "This'll do," he says flatly. "Rourke, mark the perimeter." Bulldozers start on the north end, drainage first. Rourke glances at the cratered field and mutters, "Looks like God already did the grading." Webster gives him a thin smile. "Then let's make it holy." Within minutes, the valley erupts in sound. Engines roar, blades bite, shovels strike. The men work as if the war's tempo itself is driven by their hands. No one speaks of exhaustion anymore. It's just the air they breathe. Private Don Shorty Haynes hunches over his logbook between shifts, pencil trembling. August 1st, 1944, 1430 hours. We've built airfields through mud, rain, and artillery. Now we're building in sunshine, and it feels wrong somehow. The front's moved east so fast we can hear their tanks retreating. Feels like we're chasing the war itself. He wipes sweat from his face, looks up, and sees a line of P-51 Mustangs streaking overhead. Sleek, silver, predatory. They roll in perfect formation, sunlight flashing off their wings. He grins. New birds, faster ones. By nightfall, the ground has been leveled, drained, and staked. The first rows of PSP clatter into place, echoing across the valley like distant gunfire. Lanterns glow against the mist. The smell of wet steel fills the air. The men move in silence, knowing every panel counts. They don't talk about hours anymore, only missions. At 0200, Webster walks the line with Rourke. "You realize, Sergeant," he says, "that this is our 14th field since June?" Rourke chuckles dryly. "You say it like that, sir, and I start to feel tired." The colonel smiles faintly. "History will remember the pilots and the tanks, but you boys, you made them possible." Rourke stops, resting his wrench on his shoulder. "We just make dirt flyable, sir." Webster nods. "Exactly, and that's how we win wars." By morning, the field glitters under a golden sun. Fuel trucks rumble in from Omaha Beach. Mechanics set up tool tents, and cooks light stoves for the first real breakfast in weeks. The men eat with greasy hands, watching the horizon as if waiting for a sign. Then they hear it, a deep, rolling hum that builds into a roar. Out of the dawn, a formation of P-51 Mustangs appears, silver streaks slicing through the sky. They dip low, wheels down. "Here they come," McAllister says softly. The first Mustang kisses the runway, its tires sending sparks off the new laid steel. Then another, and another. The men stand in silence, watching the wings of freedom touch the ground they've forged. A pilot climbs out, removes his helmet, and calls to Rourke. "Hell of a job, Sergeant. How long did this take you?" Rourke grins. 3 days, give or take a miracle. The pilot laughs. "You boys are faster than the Luftwaffe." "Good thing," Rourke says, glancing skyward. "They'll need to keep up." A few miles east, Oberleutnant Karl Drexler sits in the ruins of a farmhouse, surrounded by silence. His command is gone. His uniform is black with smoke and blood. Through the empty window frame, he watches the endless procession of Allied aircraft passing overhead. Mustangs, Thunderbolts, Marauders. The sound is constant, unbroken, like the beating of enormous wings. He picks up his tattered field journal and writes, August 1st, 1944. "Somewhere near Avranches, they built the sky. We dug holes in the earth. And that is the story of our defeat." He closes the book, sets it aside, and surrenders to the approaching American patrol without a word. Back at Coutances, the engineers stand along the runway as another squadron takes off, their shadows stretching long across the steel. Colonel Webster folds his arms, nodding with quiet satisfaction. "Well done, men. Mount up. We move east at dawn." Rourke turns to look one last time at the field, gleaming in the morning light, alive with sound and motion. He takes off his helmet, running a hand through his hair. "From the beaches to the border," he murmurs. "We built every mile of it." McAllister grins from the truck. "Yeah, and we ain't done yet." The engines roar to life. The convoy rolls east again, the war's invisible army of builders. Above them, another flight of P-51s slices into the clouds, silver against the rising sun. Below, the PSP runway shimmers gold, the reflection of a nation that fought with steel, sweat, and willpower. In the months that follow, the IX Engineer Command will build over 150 operational airfields across liberated Europe, each one born from mud, fire, and exhaustion. When the war ends, most will vanish back into farmland. But their legacy will not. For victory was not only fought in the skies of Europe, it was built. One panel, one bulldozer, one impossible deadline at a time. The engineers didn't just follow the war. They carried it forward. And in doing so, they changed how humanity fights.